Due to the challenging times in our world, this employee well-being workshop is dedicated to focusing on how to talk to children about violence. And the vision of the employee well-being team is to create the culture and environment where our employees, like you, feel supported in all aspects of your work and life. And part of life is talking to children about challenging topics like violence in our world. And so today we will learn some tools and skills to help us. In addition, there are other resources available at the Wellbeing Central internet site. At Wellbeing Central, you'll find resources to support you, such as our Wellbeing at Work newsletter, Wellbeing Index, along with opportunities to register for virtual wellbeing and resiliency coaching or other virtual workshops like this one. In addition, you can find peer-to-peer support through the HELP program or other resources to foster work unit well-being through our champion program, recognition resources, supervisor toolkit, and many other resources available at Wellbeing Central. It is important to the employee well-being team that we are offering you resources that also foster the Mayo Clinic values, especially fostering compassion for one another and healing from some of the stressors we may be experiencing. And with that, I'm grateful to have Jody Nation from the Employee Assistance Program here to speak on how to talk to children about violence. Welcome, Jody.
But to kind of get started and frame this up, I really think about the heaviness of our world right now and the weight of things that many of us are carrying. And it's not just one event, right? We could have workshops, it seems like every day, based off something that's in the news and something that's troubling us or feels really heavy on our hearts. And so it's a burden. It's again this heaviness, this weight that continually piles up, and we're not often able to unload any of the things we're carrying kind of in our invisible backpack. And so one of the things that I hope to accomplish with this today is to give some tools and strategies to maybe make this portion not quite as heavy and to offer some hope and optimism, because again, it is a really hard and trying time, and our kids are kind of what's most precious to the majority of us, and we want to shelter and protect them and to be scared and worried about them, and thinking about how to best foster their well-being can be something that's really hard and complicated to do and doesn't have simple answers. So one of the things I really want to stress as I go through this is you know your child best. I am going to share some strategies today and some hopefully concrete tools for you to take with. But I want to give the disclaimer that, again, you know your child best, and this isn't meant to be a one size fits all, but instead I hope to give you some ideas of things that may be helpful and give you permission to really get creative and tweak those for what fits for you and your family. So kind of the first step to this is really to observe and really just encourage you to think about watching for signs that your child may be struggling. And I know that I have some grandparents joining us today, and maybe some aunts, uncles, big brothers, big sisters, volunteers, and that's great. So when I say your child, please know in mind that I'm including all of you in that as well. But this idea to observe is really to think about not every child is going to come to us and say, hey, I'm scared about this, or this is really worrying me, or this is weighing on my heart. Not everyone's going to be verbal in that sense, no matter what the age. So really to look for signs that maybe your child is struggling. Maybe you see them, not wanting to go to school and normally they love to go, or, not wanting to go to daycare, and that normally wouldn't be an issue. Or maybe you notice differences in the way they're playing, and what they're acting out, or questions that they answer. Maybe you notice disruptions in eating patterns or sleeping patterns. And of course, those don't always mean that something psychological is happening, but it's good to just pay attention and observe those changes so that we can really then offer the invitation, right? We can extend that invite to say, hey, I've noticed that you don't quite seem like yourself, or I've noticed you've been doing this more. Is there anything you want to talk about? Really, it's a nice opening and a way to extend that opportunity for them to talk, and share with us if something's going on. And it may not be anything that we even thought of. It could be something that might not have even been on our radar, but yet seems very large to our child for whatever reason. So really, again, just offering that invitation to speak and really being open to what they have to say. And I can't stress this piece enough. It's really important that we listen more than we talk. And often we really want to share our wisdom, right? Or we want to explain things. And it's not that any of that is bad, but often when we do that, we can shut down the conversation without meaning to. So we really want to be open to being able to kind of allow that conversation to flow and develop. And again, be more of the listeners in that situation. And of course, providing some, interaction and feedback so that they know we're engaged, but really trying to let our child guide that conversation versus us steering it or controlling it in a way that makes us feel more comfortable. Because often when we don't know what questions are going to pop up or what's going to be said, it can be really scary and overwhelming. And we kind of want to steer the narrative of, I'm going to reassure them that they're safe, or I'm going to reassure them that we're taking these steps, or I'm going to reassure them that it's okay that they're scared. And again, all of those are really great intentions, but we really want to be open and be able to listen and let kind of their thoughts and feelings unfold, because often they might have a spin on it that didn't even occur to us kind of in our adult minds, that might really greatly be impacting them at whatever stage of development they're at. So I love this quote by Fred Rogers, by Mr. Rogers. If we don't let children know it's okay to feel sad and scared, they may think something is wrong with them when they do feel that way. And so I think it's really, again, important when we're talking about violence to allow them to feel scared and to avoid kind of our rush to want to make them feel better, comfort them. And I'm definitely not saying that we shouldn't reassure them, because we do need to offer reassurance, but we first need to let them express the feeling and the fear if that's something that they are experiencing. And I like this too, just in terms of the idea of validation. And all of you can maybe take a quick self-inventory of if you've ever done this. And I'm going to be the first to admit that I have. If my child says something like, I hate school, I don't want to go, I think my usual reaction might have been to say something like, oh, of course you like school, it's not that bad, or you liked it yesterday, right? And again, I'm well-intentioned when I'm doing those things, but it's very invalidating. And so now I say something to the effect of, it's hard to go somewhere that you're not really excited about, isn't it? And maybe that'll invite more conversation. Or then I follow up with, I know it's hard sometimes to do something that we don't want to do, but what might be good about it? And shift the conversation. And so again, with this idea of fear, anger, too, maybe an emotion they're feeling, letting them express that without trying to explain it away, but instead just meeting them where they're at is really important, and to validate the feeling as it is and not try to change that feeling right away. We may again move toward that direction of processing it into something different, but that validation piece is critical if we want them to continue to share with us. Because over time, if we're always kind of shutting down and telling them, no, that's not really how you feel, or that's not right, or you shouldn't feel that way, or you don't have to feel that way, it makes them think, why bother? Why would I go to this adult and be vulnerable and share something that I truly feel only to be told it's wrong? So that's where this quote and this idea of validation really comes into play. What we're doing is we're laying a groundwork for our children and the children in our lives to come to us whenever there is something big, whether that be related to violence or something completely unrelated. We want them to be able to talk to us and know that we're going to meet them where they're at. So I apologize, my next two slides are very word heavy, but I wanted to be able to share the information in a way that people could hopefully remember and digest. But some thinking about age appropriate responses, and I know I have a wide variety attending or viewing this in terms of ages. But with early elementary school age kids, we really want to provide brief and concrete answers. We don't want to get into kind of philosophical discussions or explaining in a way that they can't like wrap their minds around. We really want to be brief and concrete and really think about how do things impact them. Because at this age, children are very egocentric, which is completely normal, but they want to know how things impact them directly. This is where we can provide reassurance of safety, and we want to really listen and respond to any fears if they have them. And some of our kind of children this age may not even know a lot about violence. Some of them may be starting to be exposed to it. I know in my son's school, they did some relief efforts for the children of Ukraine. So certainly that prompted questions and fears about what's happening there. And we really, again, want to let them talk, let them share what they know, and really do our best to remain calm, talk at eye level, really be engaged and present with them when they're processing through what they're feeling, even if it's not something we might have thought of. When we kind of get to that upper elementary and early middle school, again, they're going to be able to handle that more specific information. And this is really one of the kind of ages too that we want to be careful about sorting through misinformation, because sometimes, they hear something from a child on the bus, right? Or they might catch a snippet of a news story, but not really have all the details. So again, thinking about what's appropriate to share in terms of correcting any misinformation that might be spreading. And then upper middle school and high school, they're probably going to have some strong opinions about, any event surrounding violence. So we're going to want to listen to that and hear where they're coming from. And one of the things that I always share with parents of teens is activities can be your best friend. Meaning, if you can play basketball, or you can go for a drive or go for a walk where they don't have to make direct eye contact with you, that often gets them to open up more than if we're just sitting down across from each other face to face having a conversation, which is a little bit different from the early years. And not that the early years you can't be coloring or doing an activity as well, but often children really want to know they have your undivided attention, and that kind of the gazing, the eye contact is more important, where teens, it's often helpful to kind of allow them to not have to have that kind of intensive contact. And again, especially with teens, listen more than you talk. Really hear what they have to say. If they have an idea that you think is kind of out there, make sure again to try to ask questions from a place of curiosity, learn more about where they're coming from. That doesn't mean that you're not going to share your opinion later, but you want to make sure they feel fully heard first before they feel challenged or shut down. And if they have ideas of things that they'd like to do, maybe it's for some humanitarian work, or it's for some kind of change on a community level or a safety level, you want to help them find avenues and encourage them to follow through with those ideas, because they're starting to, again, participate more in our community and in our society. So we really want to advocate for them and how they can do that in a respectful and helpful way. And for all kids, no matter what the age, we want to help them identify trusted adults they can confide in if they have a concern. I think about this especially with school violence in terms of, if they're worried about something, often they're told not to tattle or not to gossip it. Who do they go to if they have a concern? Who's a safe person to talk to about that? Or if maybe they feel like for whatever reason they don't want to talk to us about that, is there someone else in their life that we can identify that they can go to, and they don't have to try to think of it in the moment? Because often when we're stressed, and you can even relate to this yourself probably, we don't think as clearly, right? We don't necessarily see all of the options that we would have seen before. So we want to identify those people ahead of time. We also really want to work to eliminate distractions. We're such a mobile society. Our phones are really present. We're hearing radio, we have the TV, all kinds of different distractions. And really to make it a point that I'm going to kind of close out of everything. I'm going to set my cell phone down, and you have my undivided attention. And again, even if that undivided attention is while doing an activity, it's important to shut out those other distractions that might be coming at us. I think about this too in terms of having siblings in the household and how they can compete for our attention too. It might be trying to find, this is, just this child's time, and here's time for another child. Sometimes it might be a family discussion, and that can be great too. But again, really trying to show that child in your life that you're giving them your full and undivided attention can be a really powerful way to connect and respond. I also want to emphasize that you don't have to have all the answers, and you're not going to. And I think that's a hard place for a lot of us to be, because again, we care a lot about our children. We want to be able to provide that reassurance. We want to be able to kind of solve things for them, even when we recognize that we can't solve this for ourselves. And we might be grappling with a lot of the same questions that our kids do, like about why, and the senselessness and the hurt and the outrage and all of these different combination of feelings that we're having, which is really just part of the experience and part of the processing. But I wanted to share a couple of concrete examples of what to do in a situation where you're maybe asked a question that you don't really feel like you have the answer to, or you're not sure how to respond to. So again, you can change these words, edit them to something that you're comfortable with. But here's a couple examples. That's a great question. I'd like to think about that a little bit more and get back to you. And then it's really important that you do get back to them, right? You can't just use that as a whew, bought myself some time and now I'm done. It's really important that you do follow back up. Even if you still say, I've thought a lot about that and I still don't have a really great answer, then it might be where you transition to of a response more like this, in terms of some questions don't have easy answers. I think this is one of them, but I'd like to keep talking to you about your thoughts behind that question, right? So you're not shutting them down, but you're really kind of saying like, let's talk more about where the question's coming from, or let's talk more about why this is a hard thing to solve or answer. And also, I always encourage parents to, and those caring adults in people's lives, follow up. If something's bothering you about a previous conversation, or you didn't really like the way you responded, don't be afraid to circle back. And you can say something to the effect of, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation last night, and I wanted to add this, or I wasn't really happy with how I responded in that moment, or I didn't give you my undivided attention. I'd really like that opportunity now if you have time, right? So again, thinking back to how do I kind of circle back to these things? And I sometimes think of this acronym HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, meaning sometimes when we want to have those deep conversations, we want to really make sure none of those things needs to be addressed first. And I think too, that goes with our kids. Like the moment you know, see them or they come home and they're tired and maybe they're hungry, it's probably not the best time to try to engage, but to really think about the timing of that. And am I able to really give them that undivided kind of attention that I'm looking to give them? Am I in the space? If I'm not in the space, how can I convey that in a respectful way and come back to it? Or if they're not in the space, that I don't take that as, okay, my job is done, I checked in once, but to really say, you know, I'm going to look for that good opening or opportunity in the future. If they do ask a question that you really feel like, gosh, I want a more direct or concrete answer for this, take the time to check a resource or consult with a professional if needed, and then re-engage in the conversation. Because again, there's no expectation that you have all of the answers or that you will have all of the answers, but it's about engaging in that conversation and showing care and concern. Those are the best things you can do to keep kind of those lines open with people. The other tip that you maybe have heard a lot already about, especially I think all of us coming kind of through COVID times, is to really be aware of how much media coverage you're exposing yourself to, and also that your kids are exposed to. And something that I never really thought about until I was a parent, but young kids especially don't process media coverage the same way we do. They don't realize that repeated stories are about one event. Instead, it can seem like multiple or separate events to them. So it's really important to decide, how much media am I going to expose myself to? Which outlets am I going to expose myself to? And I'm not telling you to, you know, be uninformed and kind of ignorance is bliss, but you may say, you know what, I'm going to limit to this to 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night, or I'm only having a 20-minute period throughout the day, or I only check every other day, or again, whatever it is that you kind of set up for yourself, because you controlling your media exposure can also help your kids. And then again, modeling that for them about taking a break, because with social media and everything, things can be really in our face all of the time. And your kids are getting information from TikTok or from Instagram, and it's hard to keep up with all of that. So again, encouraging them to think about the source and where am I getting this from can be one helpful tool. Something that you all may have heard about before in the time of disasters, or in this case, violence, is really, when it does come to media coverage, to focus on the helpers, to really train our kids to look for, where is the good being done? What does that look like? And who are those people? What are the heroes? What an impact they're making? Because that does help to train our brain to look for some of the good that can come out of tragedy. And again, it's not trying to ignore the tragedy in any way, shape, or form, but it's saying, gosh, there are people here who are really developing, or who are really delivering high levels of hope, and who are really doing good. And sometimes with younger children, in terms of like play reenactment and things, or thinking about what to do, it's again, maybe reenacting, you know, kind of some of the saving services that go on, or thank you to our like frontline kind of heroes. I'm sure some of you have had that experience throughout COVID, but again, in times of violence or in times of natural disaster, a lot of times looking for those helpers can be one strategy to kind of help shift our focus a little bit. This Don't Feed the Worry Bug is the name of a book I read quite a bit with my older son, who tends to be a little bit more of a worrier. So that's why I chose the title for that slide. And what we're really trying to do is not let our worries kind of consume us. And if you see the caption on that picture, worry gives small things a big shadow. I found that as a Swedish proverb. And the idea is, again, that we often let our worries really grow into something bigger. And so it's important to distinguish between possibility and probability. And again, this goes both for ourselves. This is one tool to help us as caregivers and support people. It's really reminding ourselves of that and trying to ground ourselves, but also kind of passing that on to our children. We really want to monitor our own anxiety and what are we putting out there. And if we do feel really anxious, do we need to kind of excuse ourselves? Do we need to take a break before interacting, or really, again, dissect that? And one way to kind of analyze and help talk ourselves through that is to write our concerns and consider challenging that thought with a more helpful replacement thought. So I'm not telling you to talk yourself out of it or say that'll never happen, but maybe if it's, a worry about violence occurring, at your child's school, maybe it's about challenging that thought with, I know the safety plan is now being in place, or I'm doing this to advocate, or maybe it's kind of confronting yourself with those statistics. But again, it's about trying to write it down to get it out of your mind so it doesn't continue to build and build, which is what most of us do. It kind of has a snowball effect, but instead writing it down gets it out. Challenging ourselves to that more helpful replacement thought is a way to give our brain a different path to go on and show us that there's other options. And this is something you can also you can also teach your children, no matter the age. If something's really bothering them, consider writing it down together. Consider, depending on age level, drawing a picture about it and saying, is there any way different that I could think about this? Or I can see your perspective that you have on that. What might other perspectives be? And help them to brainstorm and generate ideas. Because again, when we're in that situation, we don't always see possibilities for ourselves. A lot of times that's the power in connecting with others, because when they're outside of the situation, they can see solutions that we can't when we're kind of consumed in the moment and sometimes drowning in emotions. So again, really thinking about that as a skill for not only yourself, but a skill to share with your child. And then, of course, focusing on the things you can control. And a lot of times this comes down to, routine and keeping that established routine. It might, have to do with like, what safety precautions can I take, within my own household, within other settings. What can I do in terms of my own self-care and well-being? How can I teach my child to start to focus on their self-care? So again, it's just taking that moment to really asking myself, how much control do I have over the situation? And what kind of effort am I going to put into that? Can be one way to not feed our worry bugs. We also want to promote healthy coping, maintain that sense of normalcy. Routine is helpful. Of course, sometimes it's the last thing we want to do kind of after we've had a shock or a trauma is, just do the same old, because it feels like we're ignoring it. But really that sense of routine often helps to ground us and then can help us come up with kind of our next steps or solutions to what we're going to do about it. We want to engage in healthy outlets. Just a couple of examples that I shared there, but whatever it is for you. And again, this is something to not only do for yourself, for your self-care in these situations, but also to think about, how am I teaching my child these lessons? What am I doing for that? Practicing gratitude, certainly something that you can do as a family as well. And for yourself, spirituality, again, something you can do for yourself, but again, share with those important children in your life. Spending quality time together, really thinking about what kind of experiences are we building? What kind of adventures are we having? Am I engaging my child in what that quality time looks like? And really experiment and explore options for coping together. And that's something you can have a conversation around. You can say, you know what, things have felt really heavy in our lives lately, haven't they? And, maybe your child will agree, maybe they'll disagree, but you can say, I'm wondering if we can have an opportunity to let some of this down for a little bit, or I could really use a break from some of the stress. I was thinking maybe you could too. Do you want to try this with me and see what we think of it? Right? It kind of builds that collaboration. It starts to teach them the way to look for kind of solutions or to look for outlets. And again, it helps you to feel really connected and that we're doing something. Because I think that's one of the hard things about violence in our world is we often feel really helpless. And we are looking for a way to make an impact. We're looking for a way to make a difference. And so again, some of these things are focusing on the pieces you can control. And this is one of them, is by promoting that healthy coping. I share this picture of a candle to kind of symbolize some hope. And when I talk to people about kind of trauma or grief, a lot of times I talk about the concept of turning pain into purpose. And I really want to make a distinction that I'm not talking about purpose from pain, right? I think that kind of devalues what someone has went through, or tries to say that it was worth it. And that's not my intent at all. But this idea of, if I'm taking my own pain and I'm doing something that feels purposeful with it. So, for you, and to reflect on what that might look like in your life, maybe it's getting involved in community safety plans. Maybe it's getting involved in legislative change. Maybe it's getting involved in doing kindness or humanitarian relief. Again, thinking about what that means for you, and helping your child as well to think about that. Like, what kind of a difference can I make? What kind of an impact can I have? And encouraging that. And I think with one candle being lit, it often spreads to many candles being lit, and how we can really be hopeful and, kind of be the light, fill the light, and thinking about all the different ways that can make a difference. And I think it's important to talk about that. It's not necessarily being involved in one specific cause that's going to make a difference, but it's about doing something that fits with your purpose or with your child's purpose, and really encouraging that so it can grow. And so that's one of the ways to cope with a lot of kind of, again, the uncertainty, the anxiety that comes with violence in our world. And again, trying to focus on not only the helpers, but also how can we make a difference in this. This kind of closing slide that I have before I share resources with you is about moments for connection. And some of you who have went through different gratitude practices, you may have heard this called the 2-minute rule, or you may have something related to mindfulness. And I'm just calling it moments for connection because I didn't want it confused with the productivity rule. But really to think about, how am I connecting with that important child in my life? And am I taking at least 2 minutes every day to give full attention, where I don't try to fix or correct? I don't try to give a direction. I really am able to soak in the moment, and thinking about making that part of your kind of daily routine, because often we can emotionally neglect people, and not meaning to, right? Like, I'm not saying that any of us here are neglectful in any way, shape, or form, but we get so caught up in the next thing, right? Like, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, all right, get your shoes on, get your backpack, we've got to get to the car, we have to do this, did you brush your teeth, do you have homework, right? And it becomes a slew of questions and these things that need to be done, these tasks that have to happen. And this is really about kind of taking a breath, slowing down, and just soaking in that moment, and really making that person feel our love, feel our appreciation for them, and not being what I call an emotional predator that's just trying to change something, to fix, to correct, or again, to move through a task. So think about that, like, as you kind of leave today, like, who in my life have I maybe not given that attention or connection to? And is that something that I could implement? Resources that I want to share for anyone who wants to talk more about this, or maybe you have kind of a specific scenario, or you feel like your child is struggling and you just want to talk to someone about it. The Employee Assistance Program is one place to reach out for help. I've got the Rochester phone number and link there, as well as the Enterprise phone number and link, the Employee Wellbeing site, and our external mental health and wellbeing website that has a lot of resources on it as well. So I invite everybody to check out those resources. This will be sent to you for those of you that are attending, so you don't have to try to write all of that down. And now I'm going to invite Bridget back, and we're going to transition to the Q&A portion. Bridget's going to be reading me the questions from the chat, because I apologize, I've never been very good at reading and talking at the same time. So we'll take some time for questions before we then kind of wrap up this portion and transition to the connection groups.
Great. Thank you so much, Jody. So here's a question for you. Do you have any further recommendations for the preschool age?
Yeah, so with preschool, a lot of times they're really not aware because it hasn't reached them yet. But for preschoolers, I would say, reading books about safety, watching cartoons or things they can relate to, Again, encouraging them, if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel scared, what adults can you go to? Really trying to kind of reinforce, who do you reach out to if you're scared or worried about something? And again, I think looking for those alternative methods of communicating versus the highly verbal piece, to think about, we're gonna draw pictures, we're gonna, read a story. Those types of things I think can be most helpful for that age. Great question.
Great. Thanks so much, Jody.